The Cannabis Conversation. A European perspective on the emerging legal cannabis industry.
Welcome to the Cannabis Conversation with Anuj Desai, where I explore the new legal cannabis industry by speaking to the professionals that are helping to shape it. Today is another little milestone for me. It's my 20th episode. Glad that I made it here. Wasn't quite sure how long it would go on for, but it seems to be going well. I managed to bag myself some work on a couple of cannabis projects as well, but more about that a bit later. The next episode that's coming up is another episode recorded at Cannabis Europa, and this one is with two of the leading lights in the Canadian cannabis industry, Deepak Anand and Michael Garbuz of Materia Ventures. Canada is obviously leading the way in many parts of the cannabis industry worldwide, so it's brilliant to hear their insight. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I've got Deepak Anand and Michael Garbuz here with me. Again, we're at the Cannabis Europa Valens pod booth, and this is the second day of the conference. Michael and Deepak are co-founders of Materia Ventures, which is a business in Canada, and I am comfortably told that they know everyone in Canadian cannabis. So hopefully they will be able to enlighten us.
And European cannabis.
And European cannabis now after this amazing conference. You know, they're both key influences in the Canadian cannabis industry. So it'd be good to get their opinion as Canadians of what's happening in Europe and how we can kind of merge those two worlds. Guys, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure. So, I mean, why don't you start by just sort of telling us a bit about Materia, but also about the other kind of ventures you're in. Deepak, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael and I founded Materia Ventures sort of last quarter of last year. Materia Ventures is a CBD and medical cannabis supply and distribution company based in Europe. We've had a lot of experience in Canada and kind of looking at the Canadian market for a long time. We've also had the opportunity to look at the global cannabis space, whether it be Lesotho, whether it be Macedonia, whether it be Colombia, Jamaica, and a number of countries coming online now from a cultivation perspective. I've had an insight to either help governments shape policy or to be able to sort of look at, you know, where the cultivation game is going. And so what we did in Materia was, not focus on cultivation, but more looking at supply and distribution, because the challenge seems to be, particularly in Europe, there's a whole bunch of CBD products, whether it be here in the UK, at Holland and Barrett or at Boots or a variety of other high street stores, or in Germany at, grocery stores and supermarkets. The challenge is that there's a lot of unregulated, untested, and arguably unsafe product that's on the market. And so, in Canada, we've looked at this from a compliance lens to make sure that there's quality product that's actually coming to market. And so we're focusing very much on quality from that perspective to make sure that the products that we supply through Materia, whether it be CBD or medical cannabis, are actually first and foremost of the highest quality.
Yeah, that's great. And Michael, do you want to tell us a bit about your story as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think to Deepak's point, we both spent a lot of time previously, as you mentioned, in North America and looking at sort of where opportunities could be. Europe's so exciting, and this week really encompasses that. You have about 180 million euro market last year in terms of market size. All of the existing markets within Europe are getting larger almost on a month-over-month basis. You have new markets that could open up, new tender processes that are opening up on weekly, monthly bases. So the opportunity is fantastic. And then as Deepak mentioned, it's what's the strategy to be able to actually capture market share? So as you mentioned, we're relatively cultivation agnostic. We'll source product globally from places like Canada, but also from low cost jurisdictions, Colombia, Uruguay, et cetera. And ultimately, we see the opportunity from a business perspective as tremendous because we can source really low margin inputs and sell into Europe, where we have insurance coverage to a large degree in a lot of the jurisdictions we're selling into. We have pricing that's some of the highest pricing in the world. So ultimately for us, that's the focus. The sort of key jurisdictions for us right now are obviously the UK, but also in Denmark and Malta, and focusing on continuing to build out our businesses there and just expand outwards.
Anuj, I want to focus on, the business opportunities are great, but I think I want to touch on something that's sort of, very close to at least what I'm doing, what I've done is patient access. And, I think that's an important theme. I mean, the business opportunities for sure are tremendous and significant, and we've seen a lot of interest. But I think at a high level, patient access is very challenging, particularly in the UK, where we're seeing patients having a really hard time accessing this. And this is something we've seen in Canada. And keep in mind, I mean, where we are in Canada, for better or for worse, it has been a terribly complex process from a patient access perspective. Where we've landed today in terms of our patient access regulations and laws and the ability for patients to access medical cannabis that's fraught with challenges. Several governments over years have been taken to courts demanding access to this as medicine. And there's absolutely no reason why the UK needs to go down the same path. I think, what we bring from a Canadian perspective is a lot of experience. We've got 300,000 medical cannabis patients currently accessing cannabis in Canada, and the sky's not fallen. We're not seeing people dying on the sides of roads or, getting in these massive drug interactions or overdosing on cannabis or any of those things that, politicians predominantly are concerned about. And
just take it even a level further. Like, we've seen tremendous results, which is a big reason why I think the world has followed Canada's path. We just came from a meeting with some of our partners that will be working on some technology for education in the UK. And they actually did a large clinical study where, I don't remember the exact statistics, but around 70% of patients that were using opioids for pain were able to actually get off opioids. Mm-hmm. And 97% of patients actually had a better experience with cannabis than they did with opioids for their pain treatment. So it's been, it's a relatively innocuous substance. I think one of the biggest challenges, to Deepak's point, is really around education and helping physicians, patients, government, regulators, and all of the different stakeholders that are part of the medical cannabis ecosystem to really get them educated about what's happening. But we see the pace at which it could happen as quite a bit quicker than other markets, which is really a lot of the excitement.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to pick up on there. But so we've kind of talked about the barriers that have got in the way of actually spreading the love with the medical cannabis, because no one's really getting it prescribed. And doctor education has come up a couple of times in terms of, very understandably, doctors don't know enough about this and have also coming mostly from a world of this is a bad thing. So there's a lot of kind of unlearning and relearning that needs to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But with the benefit of the Canadian experience, what other kind of factors do you think that we need to overcome in the UK to get more wide-scale adoption?
Look, first and foremost, politicians are going to have to be very open-minded in terms of the way that they approach this. And, it's been great to see the Home Secretary, the previous Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, very clearly look at this and say there's a problem here. We need to get Billy his medicine. I've been involved with Charlotte and Billy and kind of the whole process from the very start of this, and actually before that incident too. And I think that politicians need to keep an open mind to understanding and really learning from experiences around the world. I mean, when we were doing this in Canada, we didn't really have anywhere to look to, as much as we were the second country in the world to legalize cannabis, even on the recreational side. Uruguay hasn't really gone about it from the same approach that we have in Canada. And we didn't really have a lot of people to look to. But today, whether it be Australia, whether it be the UK, or whether it be France soon, or a variety or myriad of countries coming online soon, there's no reason for them not to look at Canada and sort of the way that we've done this. And I have to give credit to Health Canada. I mean, they're very, very approachable. They're, very collaborative, willing to work with international and foreign governments. So politicians should take advantage of that, is, reach out government to government and actually understand from Health Canada how they did things, why they did things, what they did wrong. And Health Canada is very open to discussing that.
Yeah, and I think that's it's in virtually any walk of life. You look at someone that's done it before, try and pick up on the good things, learn from the mistakes. And so it'd be a very obvious idea to sort of get more involved with Health Canada.
Yeah, and it's not just mistakes that have been made, which I think are important, but it's also like where we've come in Canada. Like, we started at a place where the main product choice was dried herb and people were smoking joints or what have you as medical patients. And then over time, we've gotten to a place now where, predominantly medical patients are using more consistent dosing in like oils or pill-based products. We have a much better understanding, whether it's like strains or cannabinoid sort of content and ratios about specific ailments and what the product that those patients should be using. So it's like, let's leverage all of that information. To Deepak's point, let's collaborate government to government to be able to, the UK shouldn't be looking at this as like this is a trial run and the first time we're doing this, because at the end of the day, it's already happened and it's already happening. So let's look at those experiences, positive and negative, take best in class and get doctors excited. I know in Canada, it was for a while, it's almost like a Jones effect. Like one doctor won't prescribe unless everyone who they sort of respect is prescribing. But it did eventually come to a point where there was more research, more studies, more anecdotal feedback, and patients who were just, continually coming back with positive experiences that eventually flipped the shift from, and we categorize as 3 different types of physicians. So it was always doctors who are prescribing, doctors who won't prescribe, and doctors who are open to prescribing. And I think it's that third one that really drives it, the people who are open, because not every single doctor is going to be sitting writing scripts for medical cannabis, but it's that stigma fading from people moving from, this is not something I will ever prescribe, to, hey, if someone came in with the right symptoms and presented and has tried a lot of other things, hasn't been efficacious, I would actually have an open mind to medical cannabis. And I think that's where we're at in the UK now, is trying to get people to at least have an open mind about what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. There's a journey to kind of be traveled, isn't it? And you're always going to get the people who just stick in the muds and say, I'm never going to consider it. So it's the swing voters, if you like, that you need to focus on. So that's great on medical cannabis. What are your kind of thoughts on the CBD wellness market? I mean, one of the things you mentioned was that in Europe, the retail prices are very high.
Yeah.
Do you expect that to come down? Because actually, I think that is a bit of a bar at the moment when you think about it's 30 or 50 pounds to get a kind of small bottle of oil. But A, that's expensive, but B, it's less likely to be one of those things that you try because it's got high entry requirement.
Look, 3 things on CBD from my perspective. One, it's fantastic that you actually have CBD as novel food, which allows you to do a number of things, particularly as I look at it from a Canadian perspective, because it's absolutely ridiculous in Canada that we have to regulate CBD the same as THC, and we're looking at it as this plutonium type substance that you can't actually do anything with, which we know is, definitely there's CBD has its harms, alcohol has its harms, there's a number of substances that have harms. So I'm not saying that, it doesn't come with harms, but at the same time, you're allowing for the general public to be able to access this product that they, for better or for worse, want. It's, it is sort of a trend. It is a fad. It's what people want access to. And the fact that, this is not something that is going to negatively, affect their health in any serious way is great from a European perspective. It's great that you've got that opportunity, especially as I look at this from Canada. On the flip side, you've got a whole bunch of product that's out there on the market today that you have absolutely no idea what's in it. You don't know if this is snake oil. You don't know if it actually contains any CBD. You don't know if it actually contains THC. And by the way, THC, it's not a benign substance. There are effects on the developing brain. There's a number of things that you need to be careful of around THC. I'm concerned that the product that's out there right now down the street for me that I can get today at Boots or Holland & Barrett or any of the chains might actually be unsafe, unregulated, and untested product, which is a concern. So at the Center for Medical Cannabis, which I'm part of, I'm very happy to be sort of releasing a report this Thursday around sort of what we've seen in the market out there and what we've looked at, and that really highlights some of the concerns from a cost perspective. Look, this is becoming mainstream. This is becoming a commodity. One of our intentions is to be able to provide a very cost-effective approach to products, and we will have mainstream products that are generally affordable by the public. There's certainly going to be high-end brands like you're seeing on the skincare side or the beauty side that will exist, and we're absolutely going to participate on that side. But there's number of mainstream avenues to be able to access products, and we certainly want to be able to provide that to the UK and the rest of the European market.
To take kind of a different lens on it, it's interesting the opportunity in Europe to be, from a business perspective, to be potentially the first legal cannabinoid-based product that a customer is trying. As Deepak mentioned, Canada, they're sort of looped in, there's no separate CBD market. It's all one and the same. In the US, you do have quite a vibrant CBD market, but you also have a lot of THC production and customers. So while it's interesting what's happening on the CBD side, there's also a huge amount of existing THC sales, and customers who want THC products are just probably going to go buy them. Whereas here we have this sort of unique opportunity where the first thing that we're touching is CBD, which has never really happened before. So the first time that a customer can interact with a cannabinoid product, relatively innocuous, doesn't have as many of the, it is sort of like an entry level product. And it is interesting to see that it's probably more widespread, the CBD products here, than anywhere in the world. So I don't know, the excitement of this industry never tends to stop, the sort of dynamic forces of play in different jurisdictions. But for us as a business, it's really about how do we take the best learnings from what we've seen and sort of existing market conditions, because it sort of is what it is today. Yeah. There's huge opportunities. It actually creates a lot of opportunity for us, so it's exciting.
Yeah, of course. There's loads. I mean, it is a kind of buzzword, sort of flavor of the month type thing. Going back to the question of quality, I think what the danger is if you have a lot of snake oil on the market and that's your first interaction, you may just be like, this is rubbish, it hasn't done anything for me, and you might not come back to it. So, I mean, as it's in its infancy, these things will get better, I hope. But it's good to see that that's a key focus for you guys. If we can move on, actually, to talk a bit about your personal story. So one of the things I like to talk about in this sort of podcast series is around the idea of career change, because everyone has done something different before they got into cannabis, right? And so would you mind sort of telling us a bit about your backstory in terms of how and why what you were doing before and why you decided to move into this new crazy industry?
Yeah, I'll take it even a step further and just my sort of lifetime experience with cannabis, because I think that's it sort of plays into a lot of people's stories. For me, I always found it sort of like an awkward topic and weird, whether it's with, parents or even socially at parties, where it's just something that was consumed similar to alcohol. And if, you didn't have a hangover the next day, and it was generally, pretty pleasant, but for some reason was something that was sort of kept behind the closet and undercover. So that was always just odd to me, but something that you kind of just accepted. I was a lawyer, corporate lawyer, sort of top firm in Canada, and started seeing a lot of companies raising money to build cannabis facilities, and companies starting to go public, which was really a lot of the work that I did. So I just started getting my hands around, I want to touch that and I want to touch that. And you started to sense that the entrepreneurs in the industry and the other stakeholders, there's something quite special happening. And this was about 4 years ago. And it was pretty clear at that time, with the Trudeau government coming into power, that cannabis was going to be legalized beyond the medical, but it was actually going to be adult use. And I think a lot of people, it was just very clear that it was going to happen. It wasn't like an if, it wasn't. And it's when you got into it and you got exposed to it, you realize that like, this is going to be pretty important, because it's actually going to be legal. We can buy it anywhere. This is going to be the first federal country to do this. And obviously the sort of excitement that we've all experienced, being at conferences like this or phone calls or meetings, it's definitely infectious. And I started doing exclusively cannabis work at my law firm. And then that wasn't even enough for me. So I jumped out with a group called Origin House. We were like a large brand distribution and manufacturing, mainly in California in the US. We built out the business to $1.1 billion. The company got acquired earlier this quarter. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And
as a lawyer myself,
I
understand the journey from law to cannabis.
Yeah. No, I think it's a natural one. A lot of lawyers have come in, just everything's there's so much regulations around everything, and there's also so many contracts to be signed and LOIs, and because the pace is so significant that you enter into meaningful commercial agreements at a pace that I don't think other industries have seen. Usually it's a lot more business analysis, whereas here it's a lot more strategy driven, which is fun.
Great. And how about yourself, Deepak?
From my perspective, I come from the pharmaceutical industry, and in Europe, I've done a lot of work in the parallel trade business, buying and selling sort of pharmaceutical products, whether it be from India, whether it be from, Greece and in Italy and Bulgaria and Romania into the UK and then into Germany. So I understand the supply and distribution side, very well. The way that I got into sort of the cannabis space was I set up an industry association very, very early on in Canada to lobby under one big tent for patients, physicians, sort of everybody that's sort of involved in the medical cannabis industry. And, one of the things that, I personally got sort of, affected by was the fact that I had, mothers of young children that were suffering seriously from seizures, not too different from Charlotte and what she's been through with Billy, or whether, or any of the other Hannah or any of the other mothers that have been through similar issues. We saw this very early on in Canada. And, I came from the pharmaceutical side where cannabis was this big bad drug, and, it was the war on drugs, your brain on drugs. All of those things were true to me and my belief in terms of the way that I looked at cannabis. And I saw firsthand, well, hold on a second, I need to step back and relook at why that was the case. And, talking to patients on a day-to-day basis really helped me change my mind and look at this from a different approach. And that's sort of been the driving force behind why I do what I do every day is first and foremost for patients. I mean, I'm glad that, this is a recreational drug and that we have access to it as a recreational substance in Canada. But first and foremost, it's the medical side that I truly value and really see the firsthand sort of benefits when you talk to, you look at kids like Billy, or you look at, the hundreds of children in Canada that are currently accessing this, and in Colorado and really around the world that are accessing this. I think that's truly life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the conference, there's been a good focus on the medical side, because I think it's going to be medically led in Europe. The recreational bit, I think, is no one's really talking about in Europe.
And that's a great point, because you shouldn't. Because, I mean, as soon as you start to look at this from a recreational focus first, there's a number of challenges when you look at this from a policy and a regulatory lens that you need to consider. There's the driving issue, there's access issues, there's a number of things you need to factor in. I mean, one of the best things that we did in Canada was have a medical program from which we build on a recreational program. I caution countries like Luxembourg that are going to look at tackling the entire gamut at one time, because there's there's a number of challenges with that approach.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. And yeah, I mean, you're coming from a conservative perspective, giving everyone all the goods straight away is going to be quite a lot to take. And I think it has to be a gradual process. And it starts with, unfortunately, a sick child, in the media, and people start to really understand what can happen here and how this can change stuff. I'm going to move on to my traditional last question now to both of you individually. What did your parents say when you said you were going to be working in cannabis?
Yeah, look, I mean, my parents still don't get it. They're in India and come from a very conservative background, as you can appreciate. I mean, they're constantly telling me just don't get arrested. So they just don't have an idea or a concept of what I'm doing. But I think they're coming around.
Okay, good. How about yourself, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it will be similar in the UK, where it's from a media perspective and just like a perception perspective, it hasn't been stigmatized at all. In fact, it's kind of looked at as a pretty exciting and lucrative industry. So I think from that perspective, at least today, I think when I started, there was more eyebrows.
Right. Okay.
Whereas over time, as we've seen the development of the industry, it's become increasingly exciting for them and their friends. Still, from a consumption perspective, my parents do not understand medical or adult use cannabis at all. It just, to me, shows how deep some of the stigmas are, where you can talk to people about, you can educate someone for years and years and years, but stigma can be just so deep, and people have feelings, especially with the smokable products.
Yeah.
Because I honestly think the smell is just something about it is offensive to a lot of people. And no matter how many times you tell people like glass of wine, cannabis, like relatively innocuous, proven to be harmful, they can't really figure out which one's which.
Absolutely.
So that's been kind of an interesting and somewhat challenging experience for me. But yeah.
Well, I mean, that's good to hear. And Deepak, I can share your experience in terms of parental not understanding what I'm quite trying to do. But I mean, once you sort of open people up to it, I think they start to understand a little bit about how compelling the argument is. So we're getting there, I'd say.
Oh yeah.
Well, guys, it's been really great to chat to you, and I'm really glad that everyone's having a great time at the conference. So thank you
Thanks for having us.
Sparing the time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
That was fun.
Thanks very much for joining me there. Very pleased to get those guys on. They're very in demand and we're running around in between meetings, so it was good to bag a little bit of time with them. They, as we discussed, have really plugged into the cannabis scene in Canada, but also in Europe as well, and they have a great level of insight, so really pleased that they were able to share some with us. One of the things that Deepak talked about actually was patient access, and as we've heard a number of times on this series, despite legalization in November, very few patients, if any, have received medical cannabis via prescription. And, you know, off the back of this, there was a very disappointing report that came from the House of Commons Health and Social Care Committee this week, which appeared incomplete in its information sources and its conclusions, which was really quite disappointing. I will post a link to some analysis from some greater minds than mine, but I'd ask you to have a look at it. On a slightly more positive note, we've got the Europe CBD Expo this week at the Cassels Centre in London. That's this Friday and Saturday, 12th and 13th of July. I'll be there, so hope to see some of you there too. I've also got some free tickets for you active listeners there, so just drop me a message if you want some of those. When I mentioned that I've got a couple of cannabis projects, I'm really pleased to say that I'll be working with the guys who were behind the Product Earth Festival, James Walton and Gavin Sathinathan. It's a cannabis hemp expo meets a music festival, and I'll be helping to curate the educational seminars at the expo and the festival. So I'll blatantly just use that as an excuse to also blag some guests for my show. But I think it'd be really great. I mean, there'll be a lot of people that I've already previously interviewed who are sort of talking to a wider group on all things cannabis, and some great learning there. But there'll be lots of companies, you know, from all around the hemp and cannabis industries basically showcasing what they do. And for me, it ticks a lot of boxes in cannabis. It's bringing people together, helping people to learn more about cannabis, and it's also having some fun, camping in a field and listening to music. So again, if you are keen on a festival, I'll be posting links to Product Earth. Please check it out. And as always, if you're enjoying the show, please subscribe and like and share. And I will catch you next week. So have a good one.